Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari Gopi Janavallabha Giri Varadhari Yashoda Nandana Raja Chanaranjana Yashoda Nandana Raja Chanaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, 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 Gora Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Goti Vaishnava ki jai, Shri Prahlad Narasingha ki jai, Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Yeah, let's leave it here. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Is it a good morning? Now, the first concern is language. If I speak in English, can we manage with translations and such? Okay. German translation with Salim and Russian, Ukrainian. Is it Russian or Ukrainian? Russian, okay. And Turkish. Good. Okay. And yeah, we don't need Gujarati, do we? Om Jnanati Mirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatang Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Today and tomorrow, and we'll see how many days, which days, I would like to take the liberty to focus on a topic, a specific topic, rather than reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, with the blessings of the Vaishnavas and the Vaishnavis. And my topic is cows. My idea is to focus mainly not on Bhagavatam, but on this particular book, which happens to be my own book. It's called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics, which is a kind of a strange title, but I can explain it as we go along. This is published in a series of books on the topic of animal ethics. What is animal ethics? Well, what is ethics? We might say ethics is the subject of what is the best way to act in this world. In classical Greek philosophy, the question is put in a slightly different way. What is the way to live the good life? So that's a very broad topic, but it's a very central topic in philosophy. We might say, some might argue that it's the most important topic in philosophy, because we may think about so many things, we might understand so many things, we might believe so many things, but then the question will come, so what? What does it matter in terms of how to act, how to live? So another way of understanding ethics, or a related way, could be with our Sanskrit word that we are all more or less familiar with, the word dharma. Dharma gets translated with many different words. Srila Prabhupada would often translate it as religion. He would translate it as, or he would translate religion as the laws of God. And when we think about laws, that has something to do with how to act and how not to act. Yeah, I won't go into that subject so much just now. What is Dharma? That can be another seminar. What is Dharma? But here, the topic is animal ethics, and so it has to do with how do and how should, especially how should, humans relate with animals? Or how should humans not relate with animals? There is one philosophy, one point of view that's held by some people who identify themselves as vegan or vegan, that we human beings should have no connection with animals, with other animals. Human being, we can say, one sort of animal. We have many features in common with so many other animals, and we are called Homo sapiens sometimes, or Homo sapiens. I never remember what sapiens means. Standing, isn't it? Could be. Okay, aware. The thinking beings. Yeah. As if animals can't think. That's another topic. So, I'm just explaining a little background about this book. It's was, so to say, commissioned by the editor of this series of books on animal ethics, and I know the editor, and he asked me to write this book. He didn't ask me to write about cows specifically. He wanted a book about Hindu animal ethics, and I suggested focus on cows, and he agreed. And so over a period of 2 years, I wrote and I researched, and I wrote and researched, and it was a bit of a marathon because I was doing other things as well, like chanting Hare Krishna, and I was also traveling, and so on and so forth, other responsibilities. But it was quite interesting for me, and it was, I can say, eye-opening, and it was an opportunity to learn something about cows. I won't say this book is at all comprehensive. It's really meant as a kind of introduction to this subject in a way. And as I was writing the book, I was feeling this itself could be a whole series, cow care book series. Maybe Hasti Gopal one day will write a book that can go in this series from his direct experience and reflections and so on. I think that could be quite interesting. And so my proposal is that I explain a few things. I won't go through everything of the book. It's it's a whole book, but just to try to stimulate some thought on the subject of cows. I think we all have a common appreciation already. Cows are somehow special, and cows are somehow to be cared for, they're to be protected. And so we have cows here. And we care for cows. And we invite people to see that we do this, and to learn about what this is, and so on. And so we all have a kind of common basis. It's not that I need to, defend these points to you. But we may discuss sometimes points that will help us to defend this practice that we do. In preparing this book, I also did some research. I'm sort of a book person, not much of a action person, but I had opportunity to visit a few goshalas in India and outside of India. Small goshalas, medium-sized goshalas, big goshalas. The biggest I visited, is a place in southwest Rajasthan. The name is slipping my mind now. They had, at the time I was there, approximately 45,000 cows. And that was a lower number from what they've had in the past. They had some trouble with difficult weather and so on, and many cows died. They've had, I think, more than 100,000 cows. Patmeda, that's the name of the place. Quite an amazing project. We wonder how to take care of our. How many cows do we have now? 5 cows and 2 oxen, and and they have 45,000. Yeah, of course they have a lot more people caring for them. A lot of people. I thought we can do this in a informal way, this discussion, which means that you're welcome to interrupt as I'm speaking. If you have a question, a thought, anything coming to mind, feel free to give a signal. Whether it's about clarifying something or whatever it is. One of my reasons for speaking about this subject with you is a selfish reason. Because I wrote a book, now I want to learn better how to speak on the subject, to give sometimes, public presentations and so on. And also, we have the idea to create a course, which will be an online course with the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. And so to prepare that course, it helps if I also have more experience talking on the subject. So this is my idea. Is this all right? Can we do this? Yeah? Okay. We often speak of cow protection, and indeed, Lord Krishna speaks of cow protection in Bhagavad Gita. Go Raksha. I, in my title, used the expression cow care for a few reasons, but one is I felt that protection is, you can argue in two directions. You can say that cow care includes cow protection, or you can argue that cow protection includes cow care. But somehow I felt I wanted to use the word care. One of the reasons being that in the context of speaking about ethics, there are many different theories of ethics in the Western tradition. Many, there's a few, and then there's so many subcategories. And one of these theories, okay, there's deontological ethics. Don't worry, we won't test you on this. There's deontological ethics, there's consequentialism, there's virtue ethics. Yeah, maybe we'll get into that a little bit, and since quite recently, at least in any formal sense, there is a theory called the ethics of care. The ethics of care is, I found, especially interesting, and we can get into this later, especially interesting as a way of understanding ethics which is easy to connect with, broadly speaking, Vedic tradition, as we call it. More specifically, we may want to say Sanatan Dharma, and maybe more specifically, we may want to say Vaishnava culture. I found it very, very favorable to sort of bring these two together. And this was one of my main purposes also of writing this book. It's written for, Western people mainly, especially scholars, but everyone. Actually, I made the book, I was able to publish it open access, which means you can download the book in digital form. No charge, legally. Jai Shri Shri Prahlad Lakshmi Nrsimhadev Ki Jai. Where was I? Yeah. I wanted to make it as easy as possible for people in the West to appreciate this idea that cow care, cow protection is a good idea, not just for India, but for the whole world, which is Srila Prabhupada's idea. It's a somewhat radical idea in some sense, at least in modern times. Many people in India, especially those who identify themselves as Hindu, they will say, yes, cow protection, this is what we do. This is what we Hindus do. And they often identify being Hindu with being Indian, with being living in India. All of that sort of. They tie things together, in some respects, in problematic ways. But Prabhupada wanted to have cow protection all over the world. And this is, I think, one of the very special features of our movement, of our mission. We have, still in very small numbers, but more or less all over the world, we have projects where we have cows who are protected, who are cared for, to live their full, natural lives with devotees. Someone may ask, how many cows do we have altogether in our International Society for Krishna Consciousness? And the answer is, by recent estimation, approximately 5,000. Out of 5,000, 4,000 are in India. And the other 1,000 are here, there, and everywhere around the world, including our 7 cows here. Well, I mean, it's not meant to be discouraging, but it is an interesting comparison, and it's a bit of a shock, and it could be depressing, but someone might ask, well, how many cows are being killed in the world? And the estimate is that it's approximately 34,000 cows per hour worldwide. That's according to one website that keeps track of lots of such statistics. It's called Faunalytics, if you want to look it up. You know about Faunalytics? F-A-U-N, Faunalytics. If you like numbers, statistics. Yeah, so this may be cause for thought. Of course, we would like that number to be significantly reduced, ideally eliminated altogether, but that may be difficult to imagine. What we certainly would like is that more people would appreciate the culture of cow care. And we may want to say, if people will appreciate the culture of cow care, they may have better openness to appreciating the entire culture of Krishna Bhakti. We can also say this in both directions, of course, and probably in our case, most of us, we came to appreciate Krishna Bhakti, and then we came to appreciate, related to this, cow protection. Krishna, cows are dear to Krishna, okay, simple. Kind of, if cows are dear to Krishna, then cows are good. That may have been a major way we came to appreciate cows. It may not be the only way possible. But we would like to increase people's awareness. I think one beginning of this, one step toward this would be to that our society would be more recognized as a society. Oh, those Hare Krishnas, yeah, they have cows, right? They keep cows. Just like now it's Hare Krishnas. Oh yeah, they sing and dance on the street. Hare Krishnas. Oh yeah, they have nice vegetarian food. Or those Hare Krishnas. Oh yeah, they have these quite nice temples. So if we could, become more known also, oh, those are those people, they keep cows. That would already be a significant step, I think. Yes? No? Haribol. Okay. Let me explain a little bit the organization of this book. Consists of 7 chapters altogether. The publisher insisted that the introduction be counted as chapter 1. Okay, so there's an introduction. And then the second chapter is, I call it the release of cosmic cows. What's that about? This comes from the Rig Veda, because in the Rig Veda we have lots of reference to cows. It's been counted, someone counted 700 times different words for cow, including the word go, but other words as well, are used in the Rig Veda to refer to cows. But this chapter is a survey. It starts with briefly looking at cows in the Rig Veda, then going through the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavatam. I hold off on Bhagavad Gita for the next chapter, the Bhagavatam, and then I go into some briefly modern or pre-modern literature, Vraj Bhakti poetry, and then modern compilations of articles about cows. So this is a kind of literature overview. Chapter 3, or chapter 2, depending how you count, is called Cows in Contested Fields. A little bit of a play on the word field. The idea is cows are spending time in fields, in pastures, but contested field. A contested field, what is that? Well, here I'm speaking a bit about the politics of cow protection in India. There's a lot of politics about cow protection in India. And there's a history to this. And the modern history began in the late 19th century with what came to be known as the cow protection movement. And it became, in a sense, part and parcel of the Indian nationalist independence movement. Independence from British rule. So I give some of this history, but I do it by focusing on 4 personages, 4 personalities. Some of you may have heard of Dayananda Saraswati, and if you haven't, that's okay. But he wrote a pamphlet which was quite influential in the 1880s on cow protection. Second, I talk about Mahatma Gandhi. Most of us may have heard of Gandhi. He was also very vocal about the importance of cow protection. He wrote not a separate pamphlet, but he wrote many letters and he gave many speeches on the subject. Third person you may not have heard of, unless you're from India, and that is B.R. Ambedkar. Ambedkar was one of the principal authors of the Indian constitution. And he was a very prominent leader, coming from a so-called untouchable background. He became a lawyer. He was educated in the West. And he had some things to say about cow protection, which are quite different from what the first two had to say. And the fourth person I speak about, this is no longer related to Indian independence, this is after independence, is our very own Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. That's the first half of that chapter. The second half is another subject of contestation, of disagreement. And this is the issue of animal sacrifice in India, in ancient India especially. So there are people, especially Hindus, who argue that actually animal sacrifice was never done in India. That what you read in the Vedic literature when it refers to animal sacrifice, that is either translated improperly or it's been interpolated, which means it's been added later, or some other reason. So I discussed that in this chapter. What's my conclusion? My conclusion is there was probably animal sacrifice. Prabhupada never said there was no animal sacrifice. He said the Vedas are comprehensive, they're inclusive. There will always be people who want to eat meat. For those people, there is a process of animal sacrifice. So that's something I discuss in that chapter. Then in the next chapter, it's called Surveying the Cow Care Field. And what I'm doing here is looking at present-day situation. As I mentioned, I visited a few, far too few, I would say, Goshalas, projects in India and a handful here in the West. And in this chapter, I look at the economics of reverence and care, but not with numbers so much. I don't really get so deeply into the economics in technical ways, but it's an issue, it's a concern. How do we pay for it? Or in what ways do cows maintain themselves? This is actually a major issue, and I think that would have to be the next volume if a second volume would be written on the subject, getting into the details. Then I have a section in this chapter called Bovine Products as Added Value. And here I'm talking about milk and ghee and dung and urine and panchagavya and the service, we want to say, that especially the male bovines are giving in the form of traction, means pulling. There's tangible products, but there's also intangible not products, but benefits. And here I speak about bovines, cows as purifying agents, about learning lessons from cows. I have a small section called Keeping Cows, You Keep Your Sanity. I'm quoting a god sister of mine who keeps cows in Mayapur. She has her own goshala with about 10 cows. She's from Germany, Rimati Devi. And when I interviewed her, she said, why do you keep cows? Keeping cows, you keep your sanity, she said very spontaneously. I really thought that says a lot. Other things I speak of in this subject, in this chapter. And then the 5th chapter is called Cow Care and the Ethics of Care. And this is where I sort of put the subject of specifically of cows to the side and speak more theoretically to talk about animal ethics in general from our perspective, specifically what sort of ways of thinking do we have? Well, we can start with Dharma. What do we have from Shastra about Dharma, that would help to understand ethics? We have also yoga. We have a lot of principles in yoga, starting with yama. There's yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. So within yama, the very first of 5 elements of yama is ahimsa, nonviolence. So there's Dharma, there's yoga, and there's bhakti. And then from bhakti, I've prepared the readers to go from bhakti to the ethics of care, the Western idea, ethics of care. Because especially, I would say, bhakti and the ethics of care are very good associates. I talk about animal citizenship. It's not my idea. Prabhupada mentions it. He says everyone, all creatures that are living in a country are praja, and praja means progeny. It's a cognate, I believe. So Prabhupada says it's the duty of the king to protect the progeny, the praja. Well, that idea has also been developed by two Western scholars who have written an interesting book in which they elaborate on the idea of animal citizenship. So animal citizenship, community, and bhakti. Dharma-based communitarianism. Communitarianism is one political philosophy. There are different philosophies of how humans should manage power. Politics is essentially about power and its use in human society. So one theory is communitarianism. So I suggest Dharma-based communitarianism. And then the next chapter is called, in quotes, these cows will not be lost. And then there's a subtitle, Envisioning a Careful Future for Cows. And here's where I talk about two of our ISKCON projects. I've also discussed one of our ISKCON projects in serving the cow care field, or two. I talk about Sridham Mayapur's cow protection, and I talk about New Vrajadam. I wanted to have one in India and one in the West. So there are some sketches of these. I have a section called Departing Bovine Souls, in which I tell two stories, three actually. Two of them are not so happy stories, and one of them is a happy story. The two that are not so happy stories are not so happy because they tell about governmental interference, where the government said, this cow has to be put down. The happy story is about Krshna the ox, who was the one of the two oxen of Padayatra India for several years. There was Krishna and there was Balaram, and they went together. And I really wanted to have a photograph in the book of Krishna and Balaram pulling the Padayatra cart. I wanted to, and I had a photo, and I sent it to the publisher, and they said, oh, we're very sorry, we can't publish this unless you get written permission from every person in this photo. And there were several people, several devotees in the photo. Good luck. They have very strict, there's very strict rules about publishing photographs. Okay, then I have a section called When Cow Protection Activism Becomes Counterproductive. Some of these things are hard to translate. Counterproductive means having the opposite result of what you want. And here I'm talking about cow protection in three modes of nature. Because in India, a lot of what goes under the name of cow protection, I argue here, much too briefly, but I argue that some of it is mode of passion, some of it is mode of ignorance. And what would be mode of goodness, cow protection? Well, I've described what we try to do in our projects, but I do something else. I have a section called 6 Affirmations on the Dharma of Cow Protection. Affirmations is something a little bit new agey. You want to do some self-help. You want to feel better about yourself. And I don't mean this I'm not speaking sarcastically. It's actually, some research has been done to show that this can be helpful. So I've identified 6 affirmations, positive present tense statements, that this is what we do, this is how we protect cows. To give an idea of what it is we are aiming for. Whether we have it, whether we're there yet or not is another thing. And finally, I have concluding ruminations, and that's a little play on word, rumination. Cows ruminate. When they eat, they digest. That digesting process is called rumination. And it, for, well, cows and bulls, but for the cows, the visible result we see of rumination is milk. But it's also, in English, we use the word for sort of thinking deeply about something. That's also rumination. So I've put concluding ruminations. Yeah, I couldn't resist. I also couldn't resist. I sometimes use a word which, it's actually in the Oxford English Dictionary, but used in a bit different way. We have the word divinity, right? Another hard word to translate. Anything to do with what is divine, that is divinity. So I also speak about bovinity, because bovines are, it's actually a broader category, but it includes cows. Hare Krishna. Well, I just went through the table of contents. Maybe I should stop and see if there's any comment or question so far. Ooh, there's a few. Where does, yes, I'm forgetting names. Sanjay, yes, Sanjay.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. You mentioned this number every hour, 35,000?
34, yeah.
Cows are being slaughtered. And when I hear of this, then like we are interested that violence is reduced and that living beings are well, and at the same time we have a philosophical understanding that everyone, they get back what they have. So basically those who are being killed, it means they have killed before. And in one sense, then the understanding is they will have to go through it. And there's no, how to say, there's no use in thinking so much to prevent what is to be done, what is to happen. And at the same time, compassion is natural and we would like to help. So I don't know, I'm just noting how it creates tension within me, and like having those two things, and I think I'm not like Vasudev Dutt, who was ready to pay the price for others. So yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this issue.
Okay, I would say a first point is that devotees understand Jiva Daya, one of our most fundamental ethical principles is to pursue Jiva Daya, compassion on jivas. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about this. And that means to pursue the well-being of all beings. To say, oh, it's just their karma, there's nothing to be done about it, is a problem in that it, let me put it this way, it shades too easily into approval. I approve of these animals being killed because it's their karma. My reasoning my reason for approving that they be killed is that it's their karma. That's my, you can say, my logic. But that approval of violence is a problem. Specifically, it's considered a form of violence, to approve of even you're not yourself doing anything, but just approving of it is actually, it's called anumodita. Actually it means even a bit stronger than approval, being pleased by it. Well, you may say, well, I'm not at all pleased by it, but still, it leads into, this approval. And in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, his specific example for how to change one's way of thinking about something. Vitarka Vadane Pratipaksha Bhavanam is the basic principle he gives. If your mind is going in a problematic way, turn it around. It's basically what he says. Think the opposite. And then he gives an example, and the example is that I think is one of the longest sutras. He says, Vitarka hingsa adaya krita karya anumodita, and then it goes on. So the example he's giving of a bad thought is ahimsa, or a bad action is not ahimsa, but himsa. Himsa is violence. And he says krita, whether it's done, karita, or you cause it to be done, or anumodita, you approve of it being done. All three are problematic. And so it may well be the case, it could be the case that this is, the karma of this animal, of this cow. But that's another subject. How much do we understand how karma works? Okay, let's assume that's the case. Still, for a devotee who is committed to changing, committed to doing his or her best to change people's ways toward less violence, toward service to Krishna, we cannot stop with that thought. We cannot stop with the thought, oh, this is the karma of this animal. We need to go further. And another point is, I don't know if Prabhupada ever quoted himself, and I don't even know if it's actually a proper quote from Leo Tolstoy, but there is this thing saying we hear that Leo Tolstoy said, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. It works better in German. Solange es Schlachthäuser gibt, wird es Schlachtfelder geben. Have you ever researched that?
Also to get approved.
Yeah, it would be good to know. Yeah, is that okay maybe it's not totally convincing you, but this is where I would start. Is that okay for now? Yeah. Yes. Munindra. Muni.
Krishna, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, thank you very much for this nice lecture. My question would be, if you heard something about it, for example, when we say for 40 cows, how many people we would need to take care of them, if it's there some number?
Yeah. when I was at Patmeda, this place that with 45,000 cows, I asked, how do you manage this? And they said, we have, I forget how many families. There are so many families, and each family, he said, the person who was guiding me, each family takes care of 100 cows. Now, 100 cows in India and 100 cows here may be also a different consideration. There are so many considerations. Different parts of India and different breeds of cows. I think Hasni Gopal could say much more about this, but that's what they said at Patmeda. They said one family, they can manage 100 cows. I didn't go into detail how big's the family, but they just said like that. That's a major issue. I mean, we talk about cow protection, but what about protection of those who take care of the cows? Cow care, what about those who care for the cows? Unless we understand and can do this properly, it's a question, it's a challenge. Yes, Ramananda.
According to Sanjay's question, and you answered it, for compassion, there were incident came in my mind what we had some years ago when I was still Bhakta here. We had 2 cows, Nandimugi probably remember, Sattva and Shanti, I think. And at one point Sattva was giving up his body because he was quite old and he could not walk anymore, so he fell over and couldn't move anymore, so his belly got floated, and we called the the doctor?
The veterinarian.
The veterinarian.
Yeah.
And so he came and checked this thing out and decided, okay, the best is to release him. Mm-hmm. And he started to, make the, the spritze?
Syringe, yeah.
Syringe, yeah. And we were all, no, you cannot do that. You cannot just kill it. And in this stage where I was, I really felt it like that. Mm-hmm. But what happened is he packed his stuff again, looked at us in disappointment and said, you people claim to take care of animals.
Yeah.
And then you let this animal suffer. So what is this?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's your decision, I'm going, but I don't understand this. And since this time this troubles in my, what would be the right approach to it?
Yeah, this is something I haven't come to a definite conclusion about myself. One devotee who takes care of cows in Mayapur told me his personal feeling is that when the cow stops eating, that should be the time to let them go. Another argument is, no, you can't do that. They should die naturally. Why? Because it comes back to the subject of karma, that if you interrupt that, that's a problem. And so I would say there are these 2 ways of understanding. And I sympathize with the veterinarian, I have to say, because there's a difference between, and this is a whole subject in itself that's discussed in theology and Christian theology, the suffering of animals. How do we understand this? Because an animal doesn't understand why it's suffering, or for how long, or doesn't see any alternative to suffering, and so on. Whereas humans, we kind of, I'm saying this sitting here comfortably, but we understand what is happening, what we're supposed to be understanding when the time of death comes, or when we're approaching. I think there's an interesting solution found in the Jain tradition for humans, which is not practiced in general, but some choose to, and they can only do it, it's very strict, they can only do it with permission of the elders of their community, but they have a practice called salekana, in which they make a decision, okay, this life is coming to an end, and there's really no point in trying to maintain it further. And so they get permission to fast to death. But they know how to do it. They know how to, gradually reduce the eating and the drinking and go, down to zero. And that's I don't think it's I don't think that would be against our Vaishnava understanding for us. But I mention that because when the cow stops eating, cows are very intelligent, aren't they? Asti Gopal. They know so many things, and they know when to eat and when not to eat. So when they stop eating, that means something. But whether that means, is that a signal to then help them, so to say, euthanasia? It would be nice to be able to ask the cow. And perhaps there are persons who are able to do that. And so here I think my answer, I'm just coming to this myself now. The ideal is that you have a person, a devotee, who is so in tune with the cow that he or she knows what the cow wants. Does the cow want to, die naturally after stopping eating? Or does the cow say, no, I want to go now, give me an injection? That would be the ideal. The problem is we may not be able to communicate as we would like. There are people who apparently can communicate with different sorts of animals in very special ways. So maybe that's the next step. We need to have devotees capable of that capacity. Sanjay, you want to? Yes. Yes.
I just want to know, did Prabhupada approve or did he want cow protection without milk production? Because in Vedic culture, cows are especially valued because they give milk, which is used for making, in the end, ghee, which is used for sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I wonder, is there cow protection without milk production or ghee production?
In terms of Vedic literature, there's very little to go on. On that subject, the only thing I could find was the story of the story in the Katha Upanishad of again, the name is slipping my mind. the young boy, or the boy who was watching as his father was giving cows in charity. And the cows were old cows. And this was making the boy think, what kind of charity is this? It's not very nice to give old cows. And he says this to his father, and his father becomes angry, and he kind of curses him, go to hell. So he goes to hell. And then it goes on from there, the story. But the fact that his father had old cows and was giving them in charity, he wasn't slaughtering the cows. He was giving them away, and somebody else apparently was accepting the cows, although they were old, meaning they're not giving milk. That's about all I know of to go on that point. Yes, Hasti.
So, I just wanted to say this, to answer the question of
Maybe it's on or not.
Hare Krishna. So to this point, I also wanted to comment, and you know probably Kurmarupa Prabhu.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, Kurmarupa Prabhu was the disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who joined in USA, Krishna Consciousness Movement, and he was Bhakta leader, and then he was Gurukula teacher in Vrindavan, and then he dedicated all his life taking care of the cows.
Yeah, he started this organization in India, in Vrindavan, called Care for Cows. Yeah.
And this is one, as far as I know, is the most famous Goshala in Vrindavan.
It's quite possibly.
So I just have interview where he's replying to the same question which Ananda Krishna Prabhu gave.
Okay.
And he's answering by quoting Shastra.
Oh, good. Okay.
So he's saying that he's agreeing with also the same with statement of Ananda Krishna Prabhu. The more practical returns we get from the cows and bulls, the greater we value them. The more we value them, the better we protect them. But we should not forget that the most important return we get by serving them is that Krishna is pleased.
Mm-hmm.
So cows and bulls are valuable even if not productive.
Mm-hmm.
The Bhagavatam states, "It is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging varnashram duties is to please the personality of Godhead." 1:2:13. All of our work should be aimed at pleasing Krishna. Goseva offers us a simple and unique opportunity to do so. Krishna tells Uddhava, "I can be worshipped within the cows by offerings of grass and other suitable grains and paraphernalia for the pleasure and health of the cows." And the Gautamiya Tantra states, "Worship of the cow is accomplished by gently scratching, offering green grass, and circumambulating. When the cow is pleased, Sri Gopal is also pleased."
Joy.
So even if we don't get milk and ghee from the cows and draft from the bulls, serving them still offers us the opportunity to please Krishna. And for one who has pleased Krishna, there is nothing left to achieve. So, whether they produce useful material products or not, they are always productive from the spiritual perspective. But I agree that they will be valued most and consequently protected best when they provide milk and ghee and can plow the land to grow all that is required to serve Krishna.
Nice. Thank you. That's very helpful. Could you send me that link? That would be helpful. Yeah, so that's pretty conclusive for us. I remember one of the Goshalas that I visited with one devotee from Mumbai. We went to Nagpur, and this was a Goshala where they were very, very engaged in promoting cow protection. They were real activist types, and they had a few hundred cows, I think. But as soon as we came and saw the cows, the younger devotee I was with, he looked at them and he said, "They're not taking care of these cows properly. They're not feeding them enough." And this is an example of, cow care in the mode of passion or maybe ignorance. But that's nice to have that understanding. Yeah. Maybe last point because it's getting a little late.
Just an answer to one point to the question about the value of taking care of those
Little closer.
although they don't give milk. I read in one Back to Godhead article by Hare Krshna Mataji, who was in care of the farming department.
Mm-hmm.
She said that cows, even if they don't give milk, when they just subsist on grass and hay, the value of the manure is still much greater than the cost of the food we give to them. So they still produce much more value.
Yeah, they're maintaining the soil.
Yes. The value of the manure is greater than the value of the food.
Thank you. So that's another significant point. Okay, we have simply only scratched the surface of our topic. Is this all right that we continue tomorrow morning? Yeah, okay. Tikabe. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavarinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Etymological.
When there's like all the words and I can look up and then it shows